Familiarity and annoyance. That's what we're talking about here today on Why It Matters. Hi, I'm Brandon Powell, and this is the Why It Matters Catholic Podcast. I want to encourage you to take some time and visit my website, www.whyitmatterscatholic.org. There you can find a link to book me as a speaker, read my blog, listen to the podcast, and more. We are currently in Chapter 8 of The Imitation of Christ, where it says, "Familiarity has its disadvantages. Sometimes we know a person only by reputation, and that reputation is a dazzling one. And then we meet him, and it does not bear looking into. And sometimes, perhaps, when we ourselves imagine that people are enjoying our society, they are really beginning to take a dislike to us, having had time to detect the flaws in our character." So that's from Chapter 8 of The Imitation of Christ, and one of the most common proverbs that we have in today's society is familiarity breeds contempt. It's this idea that the more you get to know another person, the more you focus on their flaws or the ways that they don't live up to your expectations. If you've ever dated someone, you know what this is like. At first, you just think the other person is amazing, like everything they do is just wonderful. All you can see is their positive characteristics, but the longer you date the person, the more you begin to experience aspects of their personality or their decision-making or values that are less than perfect. This is especially true after you get married and move in with each other. I know that my wife and I had not been married very long when we got into this big fight about cabinets and about where to put the dishes in the cabinets, because where she wanted to put the dishes didn't make any sense to me, and where I put the dishes, apparently she couldn't reach. And it was just one of those things where you would think that you love this person, so therefore you're not going to see the flaws. But the reality is, the closer you get to someone, the more they just kind of start getting on your nerves. Even Jesus experienced this to some degree. In Mark chapter 6, Jesus returns to his hometown of Nazareth, and he's teaching astonishing things, and yet so many of his community rejects him. They hear this guy challenging their sins, and they're like, "Hang on, isn't this Joseph's son?" In other words, who does this guy think he is? He's just the son of the old carpenter that we used to have. We knew him when he was in diapers. Why does he think that he can challenge us? The familiarity that people had with Jesus made it more difficult for them to believe that Jesus was divine. Many of us want our heroes to be people that we're not familiar with. We want to keep them at a distance, so we cannot see their humanity. As much as that is true, with Jesus it's the opposite. Spiritually, when we look at Christ, there's a lot of times that people want to focus on Jesus' humanity so that they can diminish his divinity. We focus on his healing miracles, not his constant messages about sin and hell and things that we don't want to discuss. We want to emphasize Christ's humanity so that we can dismiss the parts of his message that we don't like. Now, at the same time, we don't want people to dismiss us. So what do? We know that familiarity breeds contempt, so how do we handle this? One way is to simply shy away from allowing people to be too familiar with you. There's far too many people who are into looks maxing or carefully curating a perfect version of themselves on social media. And the only way you can keep that going is to not let anybody close enough to see the truth. In business, and also sometimes in church leadership, leaders are taught that they shouldn't be too close to the workers because it might hurt their leadership if the same guy that they report to is the one who invites them over for dinner after church on Sundays. Sometimes we think that friendship and honest, vulnerable relationships are going to hurt us or prevent us from achieving important goals or make us too concerned about worldly problems. Getting close to people exposes our flaws and sins to the eyes of other people. Well, here's a newsflash. There's going to be annoying people all over the place, and sometimes we are that annoying person. Sometimes we annoy people closest to us, and sometimes they annoy us. However, one of the most common characteristics of annoying people is that they think too highly of themselves and have way too little self-awareness. We've all had to endure the person talking nonstop about themselves for 40 minutes until you are praying that God will just rapture you in that moment to get you out of that conversation. Well, the Bible warns us about talking too much or being overly talkative. In fact, Ecclesiastes 5:3 says that a fool can be recognized by his many words, and Ecclesiastes 10:14 adds that a fool multiplies words. Proverbs 10:8 describes the overly talkative person as a babbling fool who will come to ruin. Such a person is contrasted with one who is wise of heart and who will receive instructions. So the antithetical parallelism of Proverbs 10:19 warns that talking too much naturally leads to sin. It says, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent." It's not just an annoying habit, it's actually harmful to other people. When we just rattle on, we become even more self-obsessed than we were. We say rash things because we're not taking the time to think and reflect on what we're going to say. We might end up giving bad advice because we haven't carefully thought through our words. At best, we give the impression that we don't care about others and their lives. At worst, it's actually true. The common factor in those who talk too much and those who keep a distance from others to protect their image, the common factor is being too self-focused. There's a lack of generosity and appreciation for other people. There's too much time spent thinking about themselves and too little time thinking about other people. The truth is, most of us need to listen more and talk less. More than that, we need to carefully consider our words. We need to make amends for the rash things we say, and we need to focus on being grateful for the people that we are overly familiar with. Yes, they might be annoying sometimes, but they have blessed us and allowed us to be close enough to them to see their flaws. Be grateful for that relationship and pray for blessings in their lives. I'm Brandon Powell. This is Why It Matters. Join us next time, and may God bless you.